far as the role of deputies is concerned, do you, in each of you, do you see yourselves as being mandated in any way by the public? Deputy Valois?
Yeah, well, of course I do. I mean, I put out a election manifesto, and I get questioned quite thoroughly in hustings as to what I'd like to see in terms of my views and my aims of being a politician in the States. Not as clear and not as precise as a political party maybe, and unless, many people would say, unless you're in the executive, you can't necessarily follow that particular mandate through that you wish to see at the end.
Anything you can point to specifically to say this is what the voice of, because you had 600 people voted for you in the election, they can say specifically, they came knocking on my door, they wanted me to do this, and I've done it, or I'm trying to do it.
It was varied, really. I mean, as a deputy, some people have got international ambitions in terms of the finance industry, or it may be very local things in terms of planning problems, or you know, the typical local neighbourhood issues, or housing in particularly.
Right. I want to come back to the point that Deputy Rondell, how does it affect you? Are you mandated by any particular group?
Obviously, as you know, Deputy Young and myself are the newbies, if you like, and we too had manifestos. Mine was probably slightly different, being in St Helier, a very large district. I wanted to focus on a lot of the parish issues and work a lot with the parish. As far as the main items are concerned, I think one of the things was to try and re-establish a fair pension for old age pensions. Now we have been pushing on that, and Deputy Southern's just been successful in bringing an increase in the pension, but it did take a long time and a struggle to implement.
1,800 votes, actual votes on your
1,000.
So of the three, you've got the most votes, but you don't know necessarily what their views are, what they particularly wanted, those 1,800.
Well, I'd like to think I do know their views. I visited nearly everybody on a door-to-door basis and spoke with them, and that's why I put a few things in my manifesto about local issues such as bus shelters. Right. That's one item that's been very frustrating to implement, a silly little thing that to me doesn't cost much, but it's taken 12 months to get the okay on delivering bus shelters. They're still not up. It'll be another 6 months.
You see where I'm coming from, Deputy, and I'm trying to find out how it is representation. The deputies here used to be called people's representatives and things, people's deputies and things. These are the expressions that have been used in the past, as though they have got a direct line to the public. Who's my representative? I want representation in the States. Do you specifically represent a group? Do you have a people knocking on your door saying, this is what we're going to do? It's what
well, certainly recent issues I've had people knocking on my door, but going back to the election as a new deputy, I was one of 4 candidates that stood for 1 seat, and I got a significant more votes than others, but still elected on 28% of the votes. Under our system I got elected. I was very clear on what I stood for. I was very upset by the overdevelopment, particularly of the Portlet, which I think has been ruined, and parts of our parish district in Mongrado, where we've seen absolute overdevelopment, and I stood for reforms and changes and safeguards in our planning system, because I feel that there's that pressure has been completely unacceptable in my district. That was one area that I strongly campaigned. It was probably the most important reason. I said I would pack my job in working for a law firm in order to do that work if the electorate wanted it. Also, I stood strongly for the reform of the machinery of government, which I think has become much less democratic under the ministerial system, and I've only found out, being in office, just how I think undemocratic it is. I also
try to join all these issues together. I think we better just start looking at what is proposed, because the Electoral Commission. One of the curiosities, is my point of view. You've got the big proposal is to split the island into 6 divisions, and the first part of that proposal, the Plan A, is it'll be 7 representatives for each of those districts. There's a strong lobby still to retain constables. There's a lesser lobby to retain the senators. But I've not heard any lobby to retain the deputies. Does nobody love the deputies? What's the problem? Why is it? Because they ought to be closest to the public.
I think they are, because in my election I called on nearly 700 people. So I certainly spent 5 weeks off work and went to every door and spoke to 750 people. And I can't claim to know all their individual opinions, but in the end they elected me, so I've taken that as a general sort of mandate. But the roles that I do as a deputy is a mixture of states work, scrutiny work, because I'm not a member of the ministerial teams, not in government, and constituency work. And what I found is that a lot of constituents ask me to help them with planning problems, with regulatory problems, and of course I've taken on a whole lot of work with people.
But why is there not this clamour to retain the deputies? Deputy, got any idea why it is?
I think it's because of the system that we have. We're a small island with, to a certain extent, a national government that wants to punch way above its weight sometimes. And you've got the mixture of people knowing how the system used to be, where you had your senators, constables and deputies who used to work together on a committee system, where you had that influence over policy and legislation directly at the point of development. Whereas now you've got not only your senators, constables and deputies, you also have your ministers, your assistant ministers, your scrutiny members, and then what people like to class as backbenchers, but I don't really like classing them as backbenchers. And everyone's an independent, and there is an assumption that we should all still work on a consensus basis. It's very difficult to do so, especially when people come in on very, very strong mandates and they really, really want to influence politics.
This issue, Deputy Rondell, the idea that all three classes under Plan A will disappear: senators, constables, as far as the states are concerned, and will all disappear. So your new members, you will lose your seats.
My personal opinion is I'm not too concerned as to what we're called, whether if we're going to be an MP of Jersey, an MP of Jersey. I'm not too bothered whether it's a deputy or what. But what I do know, coming back to our role, the three of us are on scrutiny, and I feel scrutiny is really starting to work under ministerial government compared to the previous assembly. We've all got various roles and different roles within scrutiny, but I do believe we are having an impact into some of the decisions being made.
But my representative, as Joe Public, I want representatives in there. It seems to me that the level small, you've got 300 people vote for John Young, that's the smallest it can be. 300 people, he's speaking for 300 people who voted for him. That's the sort of representation I want. So that's somebody, that's tangible, that's a small unit, I can deal with that.
Yeah, but within St Helier, for example, I attend all the events. I'm on more committees within the parish of St Helier than I am on scrutiny committees, and it's trying to get that balance. But all I do know is that I commit 100% of my time to the job, if you like, and I'm out 3-4 evenings a week, and that's what it's about. I'm not quite getting through to you. I know, you see, you're representing your views. You've got policies, you've got dreams in your head. You want to do all nice things, all good things for the public. But how is me, the public, how are my views getting represented? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. In terms of a deputy, like you said, I think just over 600 votes I received for St Saviour District 2. Now, I represent those on a local basis by going to departments, trying to change things, discussing things with ministers, and doing all that, I suppose, behind the scenes. You don't really see that. As somebody who sits in the States and has to vote with the equivalent of a vote of a senator who has an Isle of Wight mandate. Now, St Saviour District, well, St Saviour's as a whole has over 12,000 as a population. But when I sit in that debating chamber and I have to listen to everyone's alternative points of view, my vote changes every single person in this island's ability to live and their future and all those things. So it shouldn't, when I sit in that chamber, I shouldn't just be thinking about just the area, I should be thinking about how it affects everybody as a whole in the island. And because we don't have the committee system where you influence from the point of view of, say, I come from a very urban area, and you've got country parishes, and there is a mixture, and there is a join over there where you may not know how that area works compared to an urban area. So it's good to be able to communicate with that country representative.
Because strangely enough, the Electoral Commission, when they've been doing around the parishes, they've been saying things like, we want to raise the level of discussion of states members. We want them to be representing people on real political issues, not about bus stops and things like that. They don't want that. That's what they showed. Now, obviously, your deputies, that's integral to what you're about, isn't it?
Well, I've certainly heard those comments at both St Brillard's and St Peter's, where it was said the deputies need to up their game. I certainly do a more than full-time job. And in fact, I feel that sometimes I'm acting in lieu of an ombudsman. We don't have an ombudsman in Jersey, we should have, and one's having to work for individual people to try and resolve solutions to their problems. Problems to do with planning, taxi licensing, housing regulations, and of course and for me personally, members ask me to help them on other matters, so I don't take a parochial view. I try and help members right across citizens across the island, and in fact I've helped on 3 third-party appeals, assisting people. That's the sort of casework which I think only, as far as I can see in my limited experience, is generally the deputies that are doing that work.
So why is nobody coming forward and say, deputies as they are have got to stay in the state? Why isn't that part of the campaign which is going on? It's just, they're going to disappear. You are going to disappear.
Well, I think it's a good point. I mean, I think from the experiences that one has a deputy talking to other members differs according to parish. Clearly in some parishes the deputies take a very major role in running parochial issues, but in my parish the constable clearly runs things, and the deputy's role in the parish is kind of supported at that policy level. It's much more, it's about casework, an individual working with individual people. But I agree with Tracy, when it comes to one's decision in the States Assembly, I think the principles are that one has to cast a vote in the best interests of Jersey, and that's part of the oath that we take. And also the mandate that you saw, your stall, if you like, that you put out to the electorate. What I certainly couldn't do is to act outside of that, but I think you rely on people making a judgment. What's this person about? What's their sort of, what's their policy preferences when they elect you? We don't have a system where there's more precision than that. For example, when I go to the doors in my election, nobody knows where I'm going to finish up. Am I going to finish up an assistant minister, on scrutiny, a backbencher, or what? That connection is just not there under our system, and I have a real problem with that.
I'm not getting a feeling from any of you, and certainly not getting from that generally, that anybody is going to say, we've got to keep deputies. You're not going to say that. You don't say that. You're quite...
Well, I've said I don't mind what they're called.
No, but they won't be called. The job function under the proposed 6 big divisions, they will be nothing like them. They'll be more like senators. They will be more like senators.
But that's the problem, though, isn't it? Is there's no clear definition of what a deputy or a constable or a senator should actually do. There's no job structure like you go for any job anywhere else. You have a job structure and you're defined to set out a particular course of action to fulfil your obligations for that role. We have a very similar obligation across all of the roles, senators, constables and deputies. We're all required to sit in the States as a priority, and we all believe that, well, deputies, they go to their parish assemblies, they communicate between the constables and the departments, and they help out individual people. And then when we come to the States, we're talking about across Ireland policies, majority of the time, in which you have to take an overall view. So I don't actually see how we're different, senators, constables or deputies.
The worked example, I was going to try and tease it out of you a bit more, but the worked example is Plymouth. It's all finally come to a crunch, hasn't it? Because on the Plymouth debate, anything went. There was the only noticeable block was the senators. They voted basically as a block. There was 2 absentees for various reasons, but they basically, one senator voted against the proposition. That was the only noticeable, you could say, block
I think you'll
States.
find Senator McLean would have voted against.
Yeah, well, he declared what he would, but he wasn't there to
I think
do it.
that's coincidental. I certainly observed that, but I think what every member will have tried to do is to take account of all the tremendous volume of views that we'd had expressed to us. We'd had cards, we'd had emails, we'd had letters, we'd had telephone calls, visits to the door. That certainly is new to me, and one tries to and take account of that. I certainly kept a running track of the numbers for and against, but of course what I've said before is that one has to cast one's vote in the best interest of the island and reflect as best you can your mandate.
The irony was